Back in September, after WWE laid off 100 employees and a bunch of wrestlers following the Endeavor merger, remember that period, I'm sure, Tony Khan took a little shot at them. And he said, there's not a lot of loyalty at times, and there should be, and this is a family business. We're not a public company. Even if I get punched in the face with circumstances, it doesn't mean that I'm going to take it out on the staff by cutting 100 staff or laying off 30 wrestlers. And I really care about the people here. I would do anything I can to protect the jobs and the livelihood of the people that work here, and that's a family business. And that's the difference between a family business and a public company in a lot of ways. And not every family business has those principles, but we do. And that's just how I was raised. This week, Tony Khan got punched in the face with circumstances and he cut 10 people from his family-owned private company. Fightful first reported, and then later PW Insider reported, that Dasha the ring announcer, Stu Grayson, Jose the assistant, Jorah Joel, Gravity, Slim J, Parker Boudreaux, Brandon and Brent Tate, who were Dalton Castle's boys, and Anthony Henry were all released from their contracts. The Dasha cut surprised me the most out of all of them. She's the one who's been the most visible on TV. Most of these other names, I couldn't even tell you the last time I saw them on television. Stu Grayson hasn't wrestled for AEW, I think, since August. Parker Boudreaux hasn't been seen since March of last year. Jose the assistant hasn't been seen since Roosh tore his hamstring in the Continental Classic last year. These are not major names. These are not names that are going to, on their own, affect the company one way or the other. But it is a big change from what Tony Khan used to say when he would talk about honoring people's deals. You know, that being one of the things that differentiated AEW from WWE. He wouldn't release people. Talent relations would just ghost them. Someone's contract would be coming due and they just wouldn't hear from anybody there. And they would just let their deals expire. That's what happened to Joey Janela and a few other people. But he did honor their deals. You heard that quote that I shared. That was only back in September. It's not like that was from 2 years ago. This is why you need to be careful when you take shots at the other guys when they do shitty things, because you yourself one day may have to make those same shitty decisions, and people are going to look back at comments like that and call you a hypocrite. But their roster now is just so big. You know, Tony himself said on the Ring of Honor media call the other day that he needs to keep an eye on the budget so that he can keep signing big free agents. He threw a ton of money at Okada and Ospreay and Mercedes, and he has flat out said that he plans to spend more. He ain't done yet. Now, it's not making a dent in their numbers. If he thinks it will, end up making them more money in the long term, having them under contract, then I guess time will tell. I would go after people like Okada and Ospreay too if I knew they were available. But at some point, you've got to push the off button for a little bit and then take a look at the roster that you have right now and make the most of what you've got. If he signs another 1 or 2 big free agents like he's talking about doing, that's probably another 10 people out of a job. And these are the types of names that are going to be on the bubble. Now, Tony expanded on things after the Ring of Honor show on Friday night, and he said, I think that this year I have been very active, not only in the free agent market, but in the production budget. There are things tonight, for example, on one song alone, I spent like a year's pay for most pro wrestlers in this business. And the budget, not only with free agency, but production is very high. And also, we're going into a contract year. And I plan to continue on being very active, not only in free agency, but in the production of the show and producing great content. Going into this year, I have to look at where we're at. I really spent more than I planned going into this year. Well, you don't say. Now, what he's referring to there on the song, Mark Briscoe at Supercard of Honor on Friday night, he won the Ring of Honor World title 11 years to the day that his brother Jay won the title for the first time. It was a great moment. All the family members flooded the ring, including Jay's kids. It was Eddie Kingston who actually brought that up to Tony Khan leading up to the show. Tony didn't even realize it, that it had been 11 years to the day. Dax Harwood revealed on Twitter that he and Tony worked together on getting the Lynyrd Skynyrd song Gimme Back My Bullets cleared for Mark to come out to. He and his brother for years, they used to use that as their entrance music until they just legally couldn't anymore. Dax said, maybe I shouldn't share this, but Tony's exact words to me were, this is the best, and then he put a $sign and a blank space. So he didn't share how much money he spent. But basically, this is the best money I've ever spent. That's the kind of boss we work for. Yes, that's the kind of boss you work for. And it's very nice that he is willing to spend big to make that moment even more special for Mark Briscoe and for his family and for the and to Tony Khan's credit, when people say, oh, he's a nice guy, and you don't always hear about, well, what does that mean? What does he do that makes him a nice guy? I will forever look upon Tony Khan and what he did as far as the way that he treated, the Pugh family in light of Jay's death, and all the stories about how accommodating he's been, and even something like this where he thought to even do something like that. That's a very nice gesture on his part that he didn't have to do, but he did. And so I get it, and the nice things that he's done for people. And it was a nice moment there for Mark Briscoe. And he's done that before too. Bryan Danielson, as far as music goes, right? Shelling out the money for Final Countdown. But when he is asked about 10 people losing their jobs, and part of his answer is, do you realize how costly it was for me to get the rights to this song for this guy to walk out to? It's a year's worth of salary for one wrestler. In the same week that you cut 10 people for what you cite are budget reasons? That is a terrible look. Anthony Henry is one of the names that was just released. That was the biggest low blow of them all because he just got his jaw broken at an independent show last month. He's home recovering. Now he gets fired. And I understand the injury didn't happen on an AEW show, but that doesn't make the timing of it any less terrible. Evidently, Tony Khan feels the same way because he said after having time to reflect and think about it, that Anthony Henry will return to the company once he is medically cleared. So at least he reconsidered and realized how shitty that was. It sucks to see people lose their jobs, but there was always going to come a day of reckoning where Tony had to start doing this. He's taken on so much talent, and so many of these people were not getting TV time. Tony was also asked about the Tate twins being released and claimed that they no-showed on several occasions and he had to make a tough call. The boys responded to that on Twitter. Brent said, far from true. And then later on, they released a statement along with several screenshots of text messages and emails to support their claim that in their view, they did not no-show, even though by definition, that's exactly what they did. It reads to me like a lack of communication more than, there's that word again, a lack of communication more than anything. And if they were told one thing about why they were released, and then Tony went and publicly claimed that it was due to a completely different reason, then yeah, that sucks. But in reading through all of these messages that they posted, I'm not really seeing anything overly egregious here from the AEW end. They were trying to save money by booking them to fly to Canada through a different airport that happened to be 3 hours away from where they lived, and they didn't want to do that. They were told AEW would get back to them with some alternate flight options, and then they never did. And that sucks, but they clearly wanted them there at the show, and they did not show up. I would show up as expected and then try to get some FaceTime with somebody there to figure things out going forward to avoid any confusion. They didn't do that. Or at least that's how it reads to me. You can read through them all yourself if you want. I'm not going to read through all these text messages, but they did put out a statement. Their statement reads as follows. We had planned to stay quiet publicly about our release to take nothing away from the biggest show of the year in Supercard of Honor out of respect to the locker room that will be on it. Due to Tony's comments about the numerous fans, media outlets and friends and coworkers that have reached out to us, that is no longer an option. We want to apologize to Ring of Honor fans and to the AEW fans that were invested in the storyline. We were expecting both of us to be there, with so many fans wanting answers, in addition to the numerous people that have voiced their comments at the thought of us really just no-showing on some of the biggest opportunities of our lives. Due to Tony Khan's comments, here it is. My brother and I were told that we would be included in this story through Supercard, and there were plans for us to be with John and Taya leading up to the show. We were asked to pitch several ideas for ourselves, insinuating that we would get the opportunity to show that we can wrestle more in the future. On March 16th, our scheduled date following Dalton losing custody, for the first time in our history of flying in North America, previously with Sinclair's Ring of Honor and now Tony Khan's Ring of Honor, our travel was booked out of Nashville instead of our home airport of Knoxville. On Monday, April 1st, we were contacted by management accompanied by HR on a call to inform us of our release due to budget cuts. At the time, we raised concerns and repeatedly questioned if the release was due to the travel issues. We were repeatedly and adamantly assured this was not the case, and it was based solely on budget cuts. Since Tony's statement, we reached out yesterday providing these specific details, asking for him to clear this up. We have gotten no response. Unfortunately, in the court of public opinion for a lot of people, it is assumed that we are guilty from one man's words until we now have to prove that we are not. We are now forced to release this info along with the screenshot proof to keep people from putting us down on social media. We understand that putting this out is detrimental to our careers, but our back is against the wall on this, and it was either this or let Tony Khan go on saying that we no-showed. Now, when he was asked about this at the Scrum on Friday night, Tony Khan had this to say: "I have not seen their exact statement. After the show, I heard a little bit of this as I was coming back. I stand by what I said. And also, I have only owned Ring of Honor for 2 years. There is a long history of ROH. It was my call to bring them back. I liked their presentation with Dalton, and I like them both personally. I've had a lot of good experiences with them, and I would be open to working with them again in the future. But there have been times when they came and have done great things for us. We did a House Rules tour in the South, and I loved having them. And they've been to a lot of the Saturdays, but there have been some times from my era of ROH, and I've been told from the company I inherited other times in the past, and I'm just going off my experiences. As for that, I did talk about that and confirm. I think there's two sides to that story, but I appreciate you asking about it. I know yesterday they said stay tuned, so I stay tuned. I stayed tuned, he said, and then I heard, and I am not moved." So their statement did little to sway Tony Khan, who claims there is a history of this sort of thing with them, and that this was not an isolated incident. And that's it. As far as what we know. That's all we know right now. I can see it from both ends, but it just sounds to me like there's more to this story that has not yet been presented.